Hey YouTube! So, I am back with my first and only video of 2023, which is a little disgraceful, honestly. I've always been pretty inconsistent, which any of my longtime subscribers should be long accustomed to, but never this bad. Like, I usually get at least 2 or 3 in a year. I mean, there was that brief period in 2020 over the summer when I was just freaking churning out videos like there was no tomorrow, but that too fizzled out. Quick note on that, I do want to get back to booktube and just in general recording, but as I've said with these last two videos, I have tons of ideas, tons of things I want to do, and some of it is recording, getting the energy to record, set up and stuff, but a lot more of it is editing and taking that time out and going through and rewatching myself and all that stuff. But that is not the point of this video. We are here to talk about the title, My First Christmas with My Sighted Boyfriend's Sighted Family. So quick bit of background, since I haven't spoken about my dating life since 2019. Since 2019, I've had like a series of first dates, I had one situationship, and a brief love triangle. But since I hate love triangles as a trope, I did not want that for my life, so I quickly worked that out. Now, in the last video I uploaded in November 2022, I talked about having moved to London. I moved here for school, which I am now finished with that course. I have a master's degree in creative writing, which is super exciting. I also continued using dating apps when I moved here. And that consisted of just a series of like weird and or awkward conversations, or conversations that could possibly, potentially, maybe, if you squinted a little bit, been promising, but then wasn't. The one and only first date I went on is with the person I am still dating now, slightly over a year later, and that is who this story is about. I do plan on making a video with him if anyone is interested. I do have a video idea where I talk about how he has been making a lot of board games accessible for me, which is really awesome, but we are not here to gush about him. We are here to talk about interactions with his sighted family. This is also my first long-term relationship, so I haven't done the meet the family and all that jazz before. So the first meeting around Easter went well. I was there for a few hours, super nervous, answered some questions. I think we may have played a board game. They are very heavy board game playing family. We probably played Trivial Pursuit. The next time I saw his family was when we took a trip to Bristol, where the first sort of like kind of awkward happening happened. We were staying in a hotel. His dad went to collect everyone's keys and called Matt over and was like, hey, like, does Lily need a key? And Matt was like, yeah, while we will probably be together for the bulk, or honestly just the entirety of the weekend, like, she can still have a key, but also Matt is prone to losing things, so he kind of expected, like, if he lost it, I would have it, which when that did happen one time, I did have it, so that turned out to be true. Next time I met his family was after we had come back from New York, where Matt met my family and friends who all loved him, and we had a birthday lunch for his dad. Not too much happened there. We were both just exhausted as we'd woken up maybe like 7 or 8 Eastern Standard Time, then had an international flight that evening. We also still did stuff in the city, like I met up with one more person, we went to get bagels, and then we had our flight that evening. After the flight, we landed in London the next morning and then jetted off to his dad. I definitely took a nap. And so this is a good segue into the point of this video, talking about Christmas. That was my first time getting a bigger feel for the house that Saturday after we came back from New York. Previously, I just, checked out, I knew where the bathroom was, knew where the living room and dining room was, had a general sense of where the kitchen was. But that day, I took a nap in Matt's room before sort of coming downstairs and feeling people ready again. But now, for Christmas, Matt and I would be spending a few days at his dad's house. In part because, just Christmas time, you want to spend a few days with family, but also because commuter trains don't run in the UK, which is something wild to me, on Christmas Day and have limited service on Christmas Eve and Boxing Day. I feel like that one's a little less unusual to have limited service on holidays, but to just not run at all, wild. So in the weeks leading up to staying at his dad expressed a few concerns. He was concerned about me navigating. The house was pretty cluttered, and so he was concerned about me like potentially knocking things over. Or the biggest concern, which was me falling down the stairs and then suing him. I don't know if he was serious about that one, but I think like that was just the energy. He was concerned about me hurting myself and like any repercussions, or perhaps if that would make him look bad, or, you know, what might happen there. Despite Matt's assurances that I am, in fact, a competent human, he was still a little worried, a little panicked. I did tell Matt, you know, if his dad was like really concerned, really nervous, whatever, he can talk to me, he could ask me any questions. That did not happen. He just made sure to have Matt and his sister clear out the house, make sure things were less cluttered. So Christmas Eve comes along, we get to the house, I finally get the full tour rather than just like the main rooms and Matt's bedroom for napping. And I'm pretty good at memorizing the layout of spaces, or like the general gist of spaces. However, when it comes to the smaller things in a room, maybe like small side tables, random chairs as opposed to like a whole sort of couch unit, that still takes a little bit more time for sort of my muscle memory to kick in, or for me to remember like maybe don't walk so far to the right because you might bump into this, so always walk a little bit more to the left, or things to that effect. So that means that I walked into the coffee tables in the living room at varying points, and also this like giant lamp. Luckily, I think I only brushed the Christmas tree. I didn't actually walk into it, but I also saw it because of the lights, so that helped. But his dad sort of like freaked out each time, and it's just like, you know, should I move the tables? What should I do? And Matt's like, no, like it's actually probably better to keep things in their consistent place, because I'm sort of, you know, building up a mental map. But Matt's dad was sort of treating him like my carer, which is unfortunately something that happens when a disabled person is in a relationship with a non-disabled person. The rest of the world assumes that the non-disabled person is doing everything for the disabled person. In my case, that might be like, obviously she can't cook, she can't clean, she can't whatever, right? And so Matt is probably doing all of that. And that's just not true. There are some visual things that I may never be great at, or that I may want Matt to double check. Maybe, I don't know, I can't think of anything right now. If I, for my makeup, yeah, actually, whenever I'm putting on makeup, I might ask him to make sure that my eyeshadow is even, because that's something that I cannot check. And, you know, this is like a superficial example, but just things like that. And obviously, different people have different needs. They need differing levels of assistance, but people don't sort of take that into account and take it on a person by person basis. It's just like visibly disabled person, you must need all of the care in the world. And so Matt's dad was kind of like, you should know her needs. When Matt was like, why don't you ask? And he was like, I shouldn't, you know, that's not my place to ask. And I kind of disagree, but hey ho. So it's the eve of Christmas Eve, so, you know, the actual nighttime, and just before I head to bed, I walk into one more table. I think there are 3 like little coffee tables in the living room. I walked into each one at varying points in the day. Good job, me. And the last one I kind of like really knock into, like I jostled a little bit, and I knew his dad had coffee or tea or something, and so I was like, oh no, did I spill anything? He was like, no, it's fine. And you know, just kind of like just brushed me off, and it's like, okay, I got it. And I wasn't sure. I kind of felt like I might have, but also I didn't hear like liquid slosh too much. So I didn't really know, but I went upstairs and I was like, I'm causing all kinds of strife. Now, after that incident, as after a few others, I heard kind of like intense discussion between Matt and his dad, and they were having one of these conversations where Matt was like, it's fine, like, it's okay, ask her if you have any concerns, and his dad's like, no, you should know her needs, should I be more sensitive? And Matt was like, if anything, be less sensitive, like, stop trying to make everything perfect and just kind of like, you know, let things happen or ask. This isn't something that we can perfectly account for. At some point, Matt told me that he just asked his dad point blank, are you uncomfortable? Are there things you're uncomfortable with? And his dad was kind of like, no, I'm not uncomfortable. Stop trying to make problems where there are none. And that was clearly not the case. He was at least marginally uncomfortable. And that's okay. But when Matt had come back upstairs, I was like, should I bring this up? Should I just talk to your dad tomorrow? And Matt was like, I don't want you to have to do the emotional labor. And I was like, honestly, maybe I shouldn't have to, but it's a thing that's happening, so it's okay. I was like fired up that night. I was like, I'm going to talk to him. And Matt was like, in response to him feeling uncomfortable, or as a result of him feeling uncomfortable, he might say something like, we don't have to talk about this, it's Christmas. And I'm like, well, I'm not his child. I can make him a little uncomfortable. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be great. I was geared up. I was ready. Then Christmas morning dawned and I was like, oh, this is gonna be so awkward. I don't want things to be uncomfortable. One of the things that I was checking in with Matt when I asked him, like, if I should talk to his dad, was whether or not he would be comfortable if his dad kind of like confronted him later and was like, oh, like, did you talk about our conversation? And Matt was like, no, it's fine. He also wasn't sure if he would rather he was or wasn't in the room, because he's like, oh, this is gonna be super awkward. So I decided that I would do it after his dad had some coffee, I had some tea, coffee comes out, I don't say a word. I just keep texting. And I'm like, no, I should say something now. Okay, now. Okay, now. And I didn't do it. And then we finally get to breakfast and I'm like, okay, I'm going to talk about it now. And I still don't. So after we finished sort of like the main bits of breakfast, like eggs, bacon, whatever, we were having, I'm pretty sure it was panettone, like the Italian fluffy Christmassy bread. And while I had been talking to Matt about something, I'm not sure what anymore, his dad had started shaking some powdered sugar onto the bread. So I'm talking to Matt and I just hear this like sound and I'm just like, what is going on? But I didn't really ask or say anything. And his dad's like, oh, Lily, I'm just shaking some powdered sugar onto the bread. Okay, cool. And so I still didn't bring anything up immediately, but I sort of let that be my lead in a few minutes later. And I was like, hey, I really appreciated when you described what you were doing just then when you were like putting the powdered sugar on the bread. And I think this is a good time to sort of talk about how I get to know a new space. And, I was explaining that I'm pretty good with figuring out or like remembering where I've gone, visualizing the space. I can remember like where the rooms are. I remember the paths for the most part of how to get there, but for smaller things, it's still like a work in progress. It's still, getting to know the space. But also, quite honestly, even for spaces that I am completely familiar with, that, I've lived in for years or visited for years, I may still bump into things. That's just the nature of being blind/visually impaired. There are things that I may not see, or I may like step too close to the side and forget and like knock my ankle or knee. Why did I go for my ankle? Knock my, what is this? My thigh or something. And his dad is like, oh yeah, I understand. And I was like, but I wanted to talk about it because of just like walking into the table. And his dad is like, okay, yeah, I get it. And I did keep going when he was trying to kind of like end the conversation. I was like, I'm not done yet, which is not what I said to him, but that was just kind of like the energy. I was like, I do want to get this out. I want him to hear me out because I think that this conversation needs to be had. So Matt has a godfather who is visually impaired, and he mentioned him and is like, oh, maybe he would be a good person for you to talk to. And his dad's like, oh, that's a little different. I think his godfather is less visually impaired than I am. He has better vision than I do. And I was like, actually, that's not a bad idea, because while our needs may be different, it still gives you a good baseline. And his dad's like, okay, thanks, cheers, Lily, cheers. And I'm just like, also, I realized that you might be a little bit uncomfortable to ask me any questions. And he's like, no, I'm not uncomfortable. And I was like, but even if you are uncomfortable, Google is your friend. And again, like, the needs may be different, or like someone may tell you one thing and what I need may be a little bit different, but it gives you a good baseline. Also, this isn't only me just kind of coming at you, but I know from like when I've stayed at other people's homes or just like from interacting with people on the street, people can get uncomfortable. They don't know how to react or how to help or whatever. Also, it's okay if you just ask me. So when we were eating the bread, his father had asked, if I wanted butter, and I declined. I actually hadn't realized that there was butter out, but I didn't want it anyway because I'm lactose intolerant and I'm still kind of coming to terms with that. So I also knew that there would be a lot of dairy later. And so I was like, let's just not start yet. But I used that example and I was like, let's say you're like, hey, do you need me to butter your bread for you? And I would either tell you no or yes. And that's also like a good way to find out the needs. And his dad was like, okay, cheers, Lily. And I was like, all right, I will let the conversation come to an end now because I did accomplish and get through what I wanted to say. So it was fine. Matt and I later on were just kind of laughing about just like, oh, he was so awkward. But I was gonna say that I felt awkward, and I did a little bit. I felt awkward initiating, but once I sort of got into the swing of the discussion, I was just like, yeah, this is like I've done this so often, talked about my vision, talked about my needs, addressed and like held people's hands as they dealt with the awkward, and it was fine. I do think that the conversation needed to happen because it feels like it sort of broke the tension, and his dad now knew that he could talk to me. One of the things Matt had mentioned before in their like tense discussions, arguments over sort of like how to assist me and how to like organize the space was if his dad sees me about to walk into a table, he can say something. Like he can call out, he can say, "Lily, hey, there's a table here." Or there was one point where I was looking for my phone and his dad was like, "Why didn't you just tell her where it was?" And Matt's like, "You could also have told her." And so I think that like tension, that nervousness was broken a bit. And later on, his dad had a box of chocolates and was just like, "Hey, Lily, do you want a chocolate?" And automatically was like, "These are the flavors we have." Now, I'm not going to say that his dad wasn't descriptive and good with that sort of thing before, because even during that day on Christmas Eve, there was something he was grabbing from a chair that I was sitting on. He was like, "Hey, Lily, just grabbing my jacket from the chair." Or, "Lily, I'm just like squeezing past you or walking in front of you." And so he'd already been kind of doing that sort of thing. But I think maybe the anticipation of not only being mindful for a few hours, but being mindful for a few days, or what would that look like? He was wondering why I didn't use my cane in the house. And I'm a germaphobe. I'm a stickler about germs, and the bottom of the cane is gross. I am also like I don't like shoes in the house. And if someone is also like a no shoes in the house, then I will definitely not be using my cane. I think people forget like the cane goes through a lot of shit. Sometimes literally, like I could roll through dog poop and might not know, or just splashing through puddles. Like it's gross. Yeah, I don't tend to use my cane inside of like a venue or something. That's different, but inside of a house, no. I will say by the end of the couple of days, his dad definitely seemed even more comfortable. By the last day that I was there, Matt had made us all a breakfast. He had made, well, actually, his sister made pancakes. Matt made the mix. And his dad, when they had brought everything out to the table, was like, "Hey, Lily, do you want me to pass you a pancake?" And that was really nice. So I think that the conversation just needed to happen. I think that the tension needed to be broken. And I just wanted to make this video to illustrate that, whether that is for the sighted viewers who have a blind person in their life, regardless of like the role, or for the blind person dealing with like new sighteds. It's okay to make things awkward so that they are better moving forward. But I think a lot of times the blind person is accustomed to this and accustomed to kind of having to do the work, or disabled person in general. Just speaking from my sort of area of expertise. And sometimes I think sighted people or non-disabled people are so worried about coming off as maybe insensitive and end up sort of making it worse because they haven't asked, and so maybe are doing things that are not necessary, or may even like get things wrong, or and I think it's okay to ask, or it's okay to Google. Or if you have someone in your life who they may not have the exact same disability or like the same level of disability, but they can still be a resource. Because while blindness isn't a monolith or disability isn't a monolith, like that experience varies wildly, there can still be a baseline similarity. And then you have to be open to adjusting to fit your disabled person as is relevant. So a quick nod to the actual Christmas season. I got some nifty gifts. I got these really fuzzy pajamas that I didn't think to take a picture of, so I can show it here. I got like a chocolate orange, which is apparently a quintessential British experience. I have not yet eaten it, but I'm excited. Also got these peppermint creams, which taste basically like slightly more aggressively peppermint patties for my fellow Americans. And definitely my favorite gift of this year, and possibly my favorite gift of all time, or definitely in the top 3, Matt got me a Braille book. I'm just going to quickly insert a picture that I asked him to take of me reading so that I could post it to social media, because as of this recording, I don't have the books with me. But he got the book so that we could read it together. when I was in New York, I went to the Braille and Talking Book Library, which I don't go to super regularly, but every few years, like once a year, I'd go and just like hang out in the stacks with the physical Braille books because it's really nice. Braille is kind of expensive to produce. I don't know if it's as expensive as it once was, but with digital Braille or some people being more audio based, I feel like physical Braille isn't viewed as sort of something that's particularly coveted or necessary maybe, but just as like a lot of sighted people will still prefer a physical book, just holding the book and turning the pages, I do as well. And I think I might appreciate it in a different way because also it's a lot more rare for me to get a physical book. I can't just stroll into Barnes and Noble or Waterstones and just like pick up a book, because the other thing with Braille being more expensive or just more cumbersome to produce is you won't necessarily find like the latest hit, the latest bestseller, unless it's something really big, like maybe when Harry Potter was coming out or Twilight. Those are definitely in Braille. But anyway, so the Braille and Talking Book Library that was in London has closed, and RNIB does still send out Braille books, but Matt couldn't get a hold of them. So he found out about Sight Scotland, which produces Braille books. They seem to only print books that were published or written perhaps by Scottish authors, not entirely sure, but he found maybe like 500 novels. Most of them were Scottish murder mysteries, which are very much not my speed. So he did find a fantasy novel, Carpet Diem, by Justin Lee Anderson, I believe, and I was so excited. I started reading it immediately, and it was such a sweet gesture, and yeah, I felt like this was an appropriate video to talk about the gifts. Anyway, I hope this video was interesting. I hope that I am back in 2024 with more content. I do plan on talking about accessibility differences between London and New York, talking about my adjustment period as an international student, and a handful of other things. I also started doing some accessibility reviews that I'm hoping to post from when I went to Disneyland Paris and from a few museums in New York. So I hope all of that content is interesting. Do let me know if there's anything that you want to see. And as I mentioned, I'll be back with a video with Matt talking about the board games that he's making accessible or helping to make accessible. And yeah, till next time, Happy New Year!